So now it's really my pleasure to introduce Dr. Brad Emmerling, who is a principal research scientist with Pearson Research and Innovation Network, the Center for Educator Learning and Effectiveness. And Brad has really been a wonderful partner to the NICTAF Learning Studios team and teachers, and has been conducting some research about how the outside content experts have been working with the teams and what the professionals and teachers have to say about the experience and their suggestions for future work. I'd also like to introduce Don Glass, who's in the back of the room. He is the NICTAF Learning Studios Evaluation Director and has been working really closely with Brad on this particular project. So I'll just give you a brief intro about Brad. He spent 7 years working as an educator in Japan, where he developed firsthand knowledge and expertise with Japanese lesson study, and has published numerous articles on developing and supporting learning systems for collaborative inquiry and continuous learning. And I know that his most recent article is one called Between the Desks, which looks at what teachers are doing in that time when they're circulating between students and what their work continues to look like at that level of interactions with the students. Dr. Ermeling was a recipient of the 2010 Best Research Award from Learning Forward for published studies on instructional improvement through learning teams. He is currently conducting qualitative studies on blended and virtual assistance models, to your earlier question, and will present today his findings from his study of the Learning Studios outside content experts. So please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I want to thank NICTAF also for the opportunity to partner with them in this research on teacher team outside expert partnerships, and for the opportunity to share some of the results of that research with you this morning. If we could switch over to my PowerPoint slides, that would be terrific. There we go. So the goal of my presentation this morning is to provide you with a synopsis of the study that we've been working on. I'll give you a synopsis of the purpose, the rationale, and the context for this study, followed by a summary of our findings, which we're actually releasing today as part of a condensed report in collaboration with NICTAF that'll be made available on both of our websites. And those same findings and the overall study are currently under review with a scientific journal, which we anticipate being published sometime in 2015. There are many aspects of education that we do not have definitive evidence for. But one area where we do have substantial evidence, both from national and international studies, is that teaching practices are difficult to change. And one primary reason for this is that teachers construct visions of classroom practice based on long-standing cultural routines and preconceived notions of effective instruction. Even in collaborative contexts, there is a ceiling effect as to how much we can gain and expand our visions of practice within our own school context and culture. And these limited horizons of observation, as some authors have referred to them, represent the boundaries of those instructional options that teachers consider, and the boundaries of the possibilities and solutions that teachers construct as they work to improve their practice. So in this particular project that we've been working on, that I've been partnering with Don Glass and others on in our study, we explored the possibility of how we might engage teacher teams in collaboration with these outside experts as a way to expand those horizons of observation. What might that look like? Specifically leveraging NICTAF's Learning Studios model as a context for the research. As we've already discussed today, the teacher participants in the NICTAF Learning Studios model have the opportunity to partner with researchers and scientists from outside organizations to engage students in these year-long project-based learning, problem-based learning investigations with students. And so our goal in this research was to explore whether in fact, those partnerships can expand the knowledge, the professional knowledge that teachers have, and help modify some of these enduring images of classroom instruction. What does that look like? In terms of design, we conducted 2 case studies, and our goal was to start with, for the purposes of this research, 2 successful examples. When this is working, when these partnerships are richly formed, and they're operating at the level that we've hypothesized would be beneficial, what does that look like so that we can learn from those examples? We conducted 2 case studies from a high school and a middle school. Both were from an urban school district in Maryland. The high school teachers were working on a project called Tomato Sphere, which focused on survival needs for extended space exploration. The students in this project were conducting an experiment where they compared germination rates and plant growth for primed and unprimed tomato seeds. And as part of the project, the teachers developed a partnership with a research fellow from the National Institute for Health and asked for her assistance in designing a lesson where they could help students explore the role of lycopene in human health. In our middle school project that we studied, the teachers were working on an experiment that involved green energy and thermodynamics. They designed a roof color experiment where students were going to be investigating which colors reflect and absorb the most heat. And so they specifically had students place paint color into cups of water that was directly exposed to the sun, and then measure temperature changes for 4 different colors. Later then, the students used the results of that experiment to determine the exterior paint color that they could use for the design of green buildings. And as part of their project, the teachers developed a partnership with a science education consultant. So we followed these 2 cases very closely over the past year, observing, recording, transcribing the planning conversations that teachers were having with the outside experts during their design sessions. We also collected work products and correspondence to see what that sounded like even between sessions, and we conducted interviews and focus groups. And as we followed these emerging narratives and analyzed the transcripts, we especially focused our attention on what we called episodes of uptake. And uptake was defined as a discernible shift in the pattern of discourse evidenced by heightened teacher interest, curiosity, or engagement in response to the outside content expert. And so we took these episodes where there was uptake and we coded them in one of 2 categories. Either they were intermittent and short-lived, a quick conversation that didn't really lead to a lot of profound or important change in thinking, or sustained pivotal episodes that might represent these expanded horizons. Now, just to give you an accurate representation of the study and what we observed, most of the episodes were of the short-lived intermittent variety. Most of the conversations had that kind of quick pace where there was an opportunity there, but then it would pass, and they were not sustained interactions. However, each case had several episodes of these sustained interactions, and so these sustained episodes were further analyzed and triangulated through our interviews and focus groups to determine whether they represented and qualified as evidence of teachers expanding horizons for their instructional plans. And so we used 2 criteria for this analysis. First, we looked for evidence that the instructional approach the teachers selected was notably different than what they might have otherwise pursued on their own. Second, we looked for evidence that the insider approach was directly oriented to a key learning goal or fundamental skill related to the curriculum. And again, we found at least a couple of cases in both of these studies where there was evidence for both of these criteria. Evidence that, in fact, the outside expert was expanding the horizons of options that teachers incorporated in their instructional plans. So let me tell you about those stories of what that looked like. Going back to our high school case, remember the tomato sphere? Remember that the outside expert was helping to design a lesson where they would explore the role of lycopene in human health. Well, this outside expert spent time doing her own research in between sessions and explored all of the evidence around lycopene and discovered that, in fact, many of the claims around lycopene were quite oversimplified, according to the evidence in the literature. She brought this finding back to the teachers through email and through their conversations. And the teachers had a choice. We can stick with, kind of gloss over this evidence, stick with our existing instructional plan, which was to talk about lycopene as this promising way to provide for long-term survival in space. Or we could approach it another way. With the help of the outside expert, the team ended up deciding to turn this into a critical thinking opportunity for students. And as a result of the partnership, they designed a lesson where now the students were going to grade scientific abstracts on lycopene and evaluate the quality of the experimental design in these abstracts themselves, directly do the same thing she did over the summer. And so here's a couple of quotes I brought in for you today from the actual teachers as they discussed the influence of the outside expert. First of all, we realized that students had a weakness when it came to the skills and processes of science. That Maryland State Department of Education goal and indicator specifically. And so she really set up kind of a foundation for this project, the foundation in experimental design. It's making me reflect and try to figure out ways that I can connect, not just the fundamental conceptual knowledge that they get out of our science topic, but also like how the science is actually done. It's a very quick synopsis of the high school case and the role of the outside expert. In our middle school case, the outside expert provided teachers with an expanded knowledge of measurement principles for thermodynamics and helped them design a valid roof color experiment that would actually be feasible for a 7th grade classroom, which was a new stretch for these teachers to try some of this with 7th grade students. Initially, what the teachers were planning to do in this project was take these cups of water that were going to be exposed to the sun with the paint color. They were going to paint the outside of the cups and use that to measure which colors reflect and absorb the heat. And the outside expert patiently helped the teachers recognize that this would not allow the students to consistently measure the medium they were trying to test, because the outside of these cups would not provide a direct angle of exposure to the sunlight. And so again, through the partnership and through the help of the outside expert, the teachers redesigned the experiment so that students would place paint color chips directly into the water, which would give them a more accurate measurement and allow them to engage in a valid scientific experiment. Here's a couple of quotes this time I brought in from the actual outside expert in our interviews. She says, colors where the sun is shining directly on them wouldn't give us a medium. It would give us the sun shining directly on the colored jars. So I needed them to see what we're doing is actually looking at the temperature, following a set of protocols for each medium being the same. I think that they're changing the way they're thinking, but it's not just let's teach how to measure temperature. It's if our electric bill was lower because we have a black roof, does that make a difference? And so students are learning a wide array of different processes through this one project, and I think the teachers themselves are starting to see that aspect of it. We also spent some time analyzing the expert facilitative actions across these two cases. These are two examples of fairly successful partnerships. What were the experts doing? What could we learn from that? And these, we identified three things, three different actions that contributed to these sustained episodes and these expanded horizons of planning. And these are interesting and rather important in terms of the literature on outside experts, because they paint a very different portrait of an outside expert than the profile typically documented in most of the existing literature. Rather than operating as purveyors of knowledge, so to speak, these two outside experts did at least three things. First, there was consistent evidence in our observations of the work that these two experts very consistently would spend their time listening and absorbing and gathering and understanding the needs and problems and plans of the team, and then adapt their expertise to that local context. That was their mode of operation in every setting, in every conversation. Even though they may have had a lot of things they saw that there were gaps and areas where they needed to make a difference, they started with this idea of adapting to the local context. Secondly, they made a substantial investment in follow-up communication. In our final report in the appendix, we include copies of extensive correspondence, follow-up emails, and contributions that these outside experts made to sustain the work in between the design sessions. And without that, I think a lot of it would have slipped through the cracks. It was quite evident that they were helping be the glue to hold these ideas together. And then third, and probably most profoundly, these outside experts judiciously applied pressure to stretch horizons of practice and to nudge forward thinking in small increments of change. Now, these three are certainly not exclusive of all the inclusive of all of the things we've observed of the characteristics of outside experts, but they were three very common actions that these experts displayed in their efforts to influence these particular cases. And I think they provide some very helpful guidance to STEM program leaders and leaders of collaborative partnerships in general in terms of recruiting, selecting, and training outside experts to partner with teacher teams. We provide some more recommendations on that in the full report. I think it's also important to note that these findings are limited to these two cases. They're not predictive of what we might have seen in every Learning Studios partnership. We can't necessarily make those claims, but we can say this. And we also, by the way, know that the evidence we collected is not of sufficient magnitude or duration to necessarily label them as transformative shifts in practice. But what these two cases provide, which is unique in the literature and the research on this topic, is kind of a first proof of concept for an extended partnership. Most of the research around partnerships are these very short-lived externships. These extended partnerships don't have much description in the literature. So we now have a very clearly documented and clearly described example of what it can look like for an outside expert and an extended partnership to influence the decisions teachers make in their plans around their teaching in these contexts. If you'd like to learn more about some of the details, we will have the report made available on both of our websites, the condensed version. And here's a brief summary of some of the other publications and presentations we have planned for this study. On the 24th, Don and I are going to have the opportunity to be featured on Education Talk Radio. So we're looking forward to that. We're going to be speaking along with Mary Weller at the Learning Forward Conference this December. And then we have a couple of publications that are in process. We have a manuscript under review with JSD Learning Forward's publication for their February issue. We have a proposal under review with AERA, and our full manuscript is on its second round of revision with a peer-reviewed journal. So we'll be posting links and public updates to those publications as they become available. You can follow us on Twitter if you'd like for those updates. And incidentally, if you're interested in the study that we recently completed on virtual coaching, which was brought up here by Dorian, it's a very related study to outside experts and what we've learned about providing assistance through the virtual interface, both the challenges and the possibilities of that context. So look forward to any questions in the small amount of time we have left. But thank you again to NCTAF for the opportunity to partner with them in this study.
Are there any comments you'd like to make that would influence the recruiting and selection process for the experts?
I think so. I think, intentions are very different than actual availability. And I think that's the first place to start with this is, we have a lot of evidence that the ability to follow through and spend a lot of time investing in the needs of the group is what allows an extended partnership to thrive. In fact, originally we chose 4 cases to follow. And one important caveat here is that 2 of the cases just did not even materialize. And they were seen as potentially very successful partnerships. And that wasn't always the outside content experts' fault. In fact, most cases it wasn't. There were policies and politics and other factors that inhibited the groups from being able to sustain that partnership. So the availability to commit to an extended role, not an intermittent role, it would be my first comment. Yes.
Hi, yeah, you answered a part of my question based on his question. I'm kind of curious to know what kind of response do you see from businesses? Earlier somebody was talking about NASA. One of the panelists talked about not knowing the know-how regarding, let's say, mechanical engineering or statistical analysis. So do businesses show sufficient interest when you approach them in terms of engaging their experts so that students have better opportunities?
I don't have as much background with the whole range of experts that NICTAF is partnered with in that regard. I think maybe Don or Elizabeth might be able to speak to that. I know the 2 cases I studied were both government partners, and I've not studied explicitly the business relationship. So perhaps another member of the NICTAF team could address that.
I would just say that what Brad mentioned a moment ago about the sustained long-term relationship is often not what industry partners expect when they have someone available to partner with teachers. They often don't expect more than a 1 or 2 day commitment over the academic year. I think the other challenge has been that this ability to translate a very specific expertise on the industry partner's part to what teachers are trying to convey at a middle school or high school level. So that mismatch is something that one of the reasons that this research is so important is that we think that making a stronger match going into the relationship will help address the sustainability issue.
Well, I really want to thank Brad, and I want to tell you how glad I am that you all got to hear Brad. For the last year that we've worked with Brad and Kathy and his team from Pearson, whoever gets to be in the room when those conversations were happening, we're really lucky because you always learn something. And so it got to be this kind of who gets to go in when Brad's going to be leading the meeting. So I'm glad you all got to hear him. I don't know how many of you all have your own personal education laboratory at home, but I have mine. They don't always like to be my personal education laboratory, and they do not think that I passed all IRB requirements to use them in this manner. But I have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old at home, and as you can imagine, this weekend I was talking a lot about the summit, and I was talking about being nervous, and I was talking about who was coming, and I was talking about what we were going to be talking about. And finally, my 15-year-old said, "Mom, it's all going to be good. Think about who you've been telling me is going to be there, who's going to be speaking and who's going to be attending. You're so lucky. It's all going to be good." And you know what? It was all good. I really appreciate all of you being here today. I'm so thankful to our panelists, to our speakers. What an amazing group of dedicated, passionate folks who are all in this to support education and to support teaching. And what was shared here today will be shared and become part of the learning of our commission. Our commission is led by Secretary Richard Riley and by former ECS President Ted Sanders. And they are really excited about this being the moment in time where we really can make a difference around the teaching profession and we can share a positive message. I also, I'm so lucky to get to sit in that front seat and have everybody talk about NICTAF. And they look right at me and they say, NICTAF is doing this great thing and that great thing. It's not me. I have an amazing team of folks that I work with at NICTAF who make me burst with pride when people talk about NICTAF, but they're really the experts in all this. And I often describe when people say, well, how big is your staff? And I say 6. Their jaws drop because we are small, but we are really mighty. And we do really great things. And so I do want to, you got to meet Elizabeth. We talked a little bit about Don in the back, who's been leading a lot of our evaluation work around Learning Studios. Carrie Burke, many of you all talked to over the last few days and few weeks, as she has really been the brains behind putting this meeting together so that it all ran smoothly. Ryan, raise your hand in the back, has been with NICTAF and helping us to lead all of these efforts and making sure everything runs smoothly. And Sharon Seitz is our newest member of the NICTAF staff. We're really happy to have her as we gear up for this important commission work. She's going to be helping us to make sure everything is managed. So what I would say is that I hope that this Good Teaching Summit has inspired you to continue the 3 themes that NICTAF's commission has asked us to help to do. First, to send a positive message about education. This can be done, it is being done, and it can be done well. And so as we think about the incredible examples that were shared here today, that's something that we need to raise this message, a positive message about education. The second thing is, let's get this message out nationally. We are so pleased to be here with other members of organizations who are doing great things in education. We look forward to partnering with you in the years to come. We want to share more stories, and we want to have those kinds of models and case studies to back up what we know is being done well and to illustrate the conditions that are necessary to have in place. And then thirdly, let's do it collaboratively. I have loved today. It's good for me. Because there's so much good work that is happening in education that's complementary. This idea of collaboration, we could play a game for every time someone said the word collaboration, and that is what we want, and it has to apply at every level, including at the national level, where all of our organizations come together and say, you know what, we all agree on this. Let's push that message together instead of each one of us by ourselves. Let's build on these synergies, let's find points of common intersection, and then let's work together to support good teaching. So Elizabeth mentioned earlier, and I just want to put in a little plug, we are going to have a continuation of this conversation today. We're really pleased to be partnering with Ed Week for an online chat from 4 to 5 today. And if you go to the NICTAF website, nictaf.org, you can find the link to get on. And I'm going to be joined by our other brand new commissioner, who we're really excited about, the superintendent of San Francisco Unified Public Schools, Richard Carranza, who's going to be on this online chat with me, talking about how we support good teaching and how we put in place the conditions needed to support this good teaching. So many thanks to all of you, and I look forward to being in touch and working collaboratively together. Thank you.